Hello and welcome to today's reflection from Luke chapter 6, verses 39 to the end. As I read, I can imagine Luke sat with all these wonderful stories which Jesus told, organising them into groups as he writes down the gospel for us. Jesus was a master of stories to help people remember his message. Many of them seem at first outlandish and over the top, showing what we probably call a very dry sense of humour. They're often like the satirical cartoons we see in the newspapers, joking but driving home an important point as they settle in our minds and we're challenged to reflect on them and on their meaning for us today, as much as Jesus's people did at the time. So in today's reading, we've four such stories. Here they are. He also told them a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. Why do you see the speck in your neighbour's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbour, "Friend, let me take out the speck in your eye," when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbour's eye. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit, for each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of their heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my word, and acts on them. That one is like a man building a house who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood arose, the river burst against that house, but it could not shake it because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, immediately it fell, and great was the ruin of that house. And we thank God for his word. Well, some of these sayings have made their way into regular sayings in our own culture and daily lives. The blind leading the blind is a common saying even now. And like me, I'm sure you can think of some of those who work their way into positions of authority in our society who seem so very blind and yet have many people following them. I wonder which of these stories speaks to you most today. Well, I live by the sea and my house is built on sand. Thankfully, I understand that to ensure it remains upright, it's built on a large concrete block, which allows for the shifting sand over time, or at least something like that. We see the disaster when strong foundations are not put under houses, both in flood disasters abroad, most recently the one the people in Brazil are suffering from, and also when corners are cut in buildings in our own country. I think of financial shortcuts made in the materials used in housing and the disasters such as fire and those terrible damp living conditions we see on our news. As a primary school head, I always set a lot of store on the teaching of our very youngest children, often called the foundation stage, and I'd show a keen interest in their progress and the interventions which we put in place to make sure that all the children entered the later years with the skills and the knowledge they needed to thrive. School ready, we used to call it. Is he school ready, do you think, we'd say? Often we choose to spend extra budget on staffing, on intervention programs and additional expert advice to achieve this. Because to do so, apart from not being in the child's interest, was definitely poor economy. Trying to catch children up who fall behind is always so much more difficult later on, both financially and emotionally for the children. It takes the joy out of their learning when they feel they're always behind and struggling. And eventually it can sometimes lead to disaffection and them falling away from school and poor achievement at the end of their careers. Of course, it's a bit like that with our relationship with God and our understanding of how we should live our lives. Do we have that strong foundation which comes from prayer and from the stimulation of reading God's word to keep us in that close relationship with God, which we need to be able to be his people, like the buildings, aren't we, that he created us to be. Maybe Jesus was having a dig at those who were building a magnificent temple in Jerusalem at the time, but were so way off the mark in their teaching and the relationship with God. There was poor foundation in that. They'd become obsessed with following the law, and in doing so had lost their relationship with God and their call to be the light to the nations. Maybe one of the other stories has spoken to you today and is offering a fresh insight into how God's challenging you to become the wonderful child he created and loves deeply. So enjoy reflecting today, and I hope that you have a good day, and whatever you do, you know God's blessing. Bye-bye for now.